Cloning of sheep and frog. A clone is a cell or group of cells, or it can be an organism which are genetically identical to the parents. So this is known as clone, and the process is known as cloning. So cloning is a process that is used to create copies of a DNA fragment, or it can be a copy of cells or of the whole organism. Now the first organism that was cloned was a unicellular organism named as sea urchin. Later scientists performed experiments on frogs and on sheep for cloning. Bricks and cakes produced normal tadpole clones by using nuclei from early embryo, and they use a technique known as nuclear transfer technique, which is one of the viable technique of genetic engineering. Now what happens in nuclear transfer? Nucleus directs cell growth, proliferation, differentiation and development of the organism. So if we use embryonic cells which are at their early stages, it is better for nuclear transfer technique than rather than using the embryonic cell of later stages. So this technique of nuclear transfer will ultimately result in the production of the whole organism. Now John Gurdon, they use somewhat a different technique. They transplant the nucleus of a tadpole intestinal cell into an enucleated frog egg, and they produce number of tadpoles which are genetically identical to one from the intestinal cell they were taking. So from this they found their cells actually retain the genetic material genetic information as they divide, proliferate and differentiate into the organism. Then Steen-Willitsen, they use a chemical process to separate one cell from the 8-cell lamb embryo, and later they use electric shock technique to introduce this cell into the enucleated egg cell, and from this they develop 2 lamb embryos which are then inserted into the genome of the surrogate lamb mother. This gives birth to 3 live lambs. At the same time, Wilmot and Keith, they also perform an experiment on sheep, but they somewhat use a different technique. Here they used culture sheep cells which they freeze in a laboratory. They transfer the nuclei from the culture cells into enucleated sheep egg cells, and from this technique 2 lambs were produced, one named as Megan and the other named as Morik. These transgenic sheeps were also produced for other ways. For example, the gene which is responsible for the production of factor 9, it is also inserted into the sheep. Now what is the purpose of factor 9 gene? Factor 9 is actually a blood clot protein, and it is used to treat hemophilia. Wilmot and Keith, they insert factor 9 gene into the sheep, and the sheep named Polly that produce factor 9 in her milk. So in this way Wilmot and Keith prepared another transgenic sheep. Now Wilmot and Keith, they also performed experiments on the sheep by using adult somatic cells for the first time. And after the production of sheep, number of ethical issue arises here. Now how the adult somatic cells are used for the production of sheep dolly. Now here every cell nuclei has a complete genetic information that we know, and the embryo cells have the ability to activate any gene, to halt any gene in order to keep the balance. So the embryonic cells has the ability to check out the negative feedback as well as the positive feedback related to the genes. Now Wilmot and Keith performed 277 attempts, and of the 277 attempts only one embryo was produced that was carried into a lamb mother, and a famous lamb was produced named as Dolly, and from here the controversies arises regarding the cloning technique. Dolly was born in 1996, or is इसके 6 साल के बाद डॉली रेस्पिरेटरी डिस्ट्रेस और दूसरी बीमारियों में मुब्तला हो गई, जैसे कि इमैच्योर आर्थराइटिस. So cloning, no doubt, it is an adult cell that can reprogram themselves and turn into a new human being or into a new individual. But ethical issue arises over here that cloning makes human gods, and health risks are there in cloning animals. So keep in mind that all animals have the right, and whether they are the ethical rights, social rights or the legal rights, we have to consider their behavioral issue, their social issues as well. So all animals are equally treated.